Hey everybody, welcome back to the Financial Advisors Workshop from today's Market Explained Financial Advisors Workshop from the 4-Star Media Network. And today we have a very interesting advisor in Cheeseland, as I call it, Wisconsin. And he didn't originate there, but Timothy Bickmore is the B in LBW in Financial Advisors, right? Is what you call yourself.
LBW Wealth Management, LBW Wealth. Sometimes just LBW. It's all
LBW.
Yeah.
Great. Well, welcome to the Financial Advisors Workshop, Tim. We're going to have a great discussion today.
Thank you, Brian. I really appreciate it.
Excellent. So Tim, tell us a little bit about how you got started. You grew up in Salt Lake City, but somehow you got over to Wisconsin. Tell us a little bit.
Yeah, my story is interesting. I kind of got into the industry unknowingly. I like to tell people I stumbled into it is the best way to explain it. Right. But yes, I grew up in Salt Lake City, and I ended up going to school in a small town, Appleton, Wisconsin, right by Green Bay, just south of Green Bay, to a small liberal arts school named Lawrence University. That's the school's name. And people always ask, how did you do that? I had played football there. And so my high school football coach knew my college coach. And so he said, hey, you should look at Lawrence University. And I knew nothing about Wisconsin. I knew Green Bay, and that's about it. So I went and visited, loved it. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go here. So that's another stumble. I always like to tell people I kind of stumbled into it. And it was probably one of the better stumbling decisions I've made going to that school. But that really kind of launched me into being in Wisconsin. After I graduated, I ended up living in Monaco, Wisconsin, which is further north. And I ended up getting hired by a large registered investment advisor in Rhinelander, Wisconsin. So I worked there for about 2 years. And when I guess to kind of how I got into the industry is when I was at school at Lawrence, I took a lot of, I knew I wanted to be in business. And I started taking a lot of accounting and finance classes, at least as much as I could, because I was an econ major. There was no business school at Lawrence. Right. And I did a couple classes on investment analysis. So we did a couple stock analysis, and I was like, hey, I think this is actually really fun. I really enjoy it. I love the analytical piece. I want to be an investment analyst. And once I kind of got to graduation, I wasn't super prepared to go into the real world. I didn't have many internships, and I was like, well, I can't get into private equity. I can't do this private banking. And so when I started looking at it, I was like, but I really just, I want to do something in this realm. And so I had the Edward Jones, the Northwest Mutuals reach out to me, try to recruit me. And I just was like, I don't want to sell something that I just don't believe in, or I haven't done my own research. It's just not what I want to do. And so I happened to just doing my own research, find this registered investment advisory space. And I was like, hey, this is interesting. Sounds like they're doing their own work. They're doing their own research. And so the way I ended up getting to the firm up north is I cold called. I literally got on the phone and I started dialing. And I would call all the companies I could find on this one website I found in the state of Wisconsin and Illinois. And they happened to pick up, and they were hiring at the time. And they brought me in. I started as essentially like a part-time receptionist. And I happened to be the person that raises his hand a lot. So they'd say, hey, we need this to be done. And I would say, okay, I'll do it. And I just ended up growing my way through this. And what was interesting is I learned really, it was a large shop at the time. They were sitting at about 3.5 to 4 billion of assets under management. They did a lot of consulting on the 401k pension side, but they also did a lot of individual wealth management. So I saw a wide range of different services that were provided by a registered investment advisor in this one firm. And it allowed me to really grow quite quickly. And they allowed me kind of just to run with different things. So I learned anywhere from the marketing side all the way to the back operations, doing multi-custodian work, making sure that things were working on the back end, helping the investment analyst team, helping the financial planning team. Right. And so I just worked my way up really, really quickly in just different areas. But from there, I ended up jumping down to Madison, got recruited by a firm. And that's where I met my 2 business partners. And I was really kind of picked up to lead the financial planning team and to kind of help develop that piece of it. Just things kind of happened to that firm that we just decided, hey, you know what, let's try to do our own thing and just jump. And we ended up jumping ship. And that's when we started LBW Wealth Management. That was about 6.5 years ago. And from there, I ended up getting my CFP. I then further went and got my CPWA, which some people aren't familiar with, which is a certified private wealth advisor certification. And I kind of led up this financial planning team and have been doing that ever since. So I never thought I would be a financial planner, to be very honest. It was never a goal. I never had it set, but it really fits my personality well. I have that analytical skill set, but I also really like the front facing piece of it.
Right.
And so it's a nice balancing act for fulfillment for me, where I get fulfilled both by working with clients, but also doing a lot of the back work and the analysis that we do for our clients. So yeah, that's how I kind of got to where I am today.
Where you are now. Well, and earlier we were talking, you started out as an AUM based firm, but now you've gone more to subscription. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Correct. Yeah. So when we first started LBW, like I think most RAs, or at least at the time, because when we started back in 2015, our previous two firms were very investment management heavy, which makes sense, right? They were AUM based firms, and it was a big focus of their service. And so when we started LBW, we had the same focus. We're like, hey, we're going to do this assets under management. And this planning kind of idea was a little bit in its infancy. But as we continued to go through and developing our own planning process, we started to realize that, hey, there's a lot of value here, and there's a lot going on that we can do and provide. And as we started growing as a firm as well, we just happened to get into this client base that our industry calls Henry, so high earners, not rich yet. And so what was hard is that they didn't have a lot of assets that we could manage, but there was a lot that we could do for them on the planning side. And so we really just started to get into this demographic. We're like, you know what, there's a really good fit for us, but that means that we need to switch our service and our model. And so we ended up doing a subscription-based fee. So we get paid monthly, and people can cancel at any time, and they are not required to bring us any assets. Now we can do the investment management side if they would like, but they're not required to. And then we've set our fee to be able to be compensated for the work that we do on the planning side. We've been on that model we started that in 2020. So we've been on it for about 2 years or so. And we've grown it pretty significantly. We've increased our fees, and we've seen a really good retention and a really good response from our clients as well. And it's allowed us to get access to people that other firms may just not even look at because they don't have the AUM to support to make it make sense.
Right. Now your revenue is about 650,000. Your AUM is 60 roughly. So that means there is a fair amount of subscription, and you're not doing 81%. You're doing about 0.8. So that means it's about 20 to 25% subscription, right? Something
correct.
Like
yeah. I think we're roughly around there at this point. Yeah.
Good. Now that's the different model than many, as you pointed out. So how is retention of the subscription model?
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about retention. So far, it's actually been quite good. If you look at it since we've started, it's been about 91% retention. We have lost a little bit of retention in the beginning of this year, but to really kind of dive into the retention piece, it's really more so because our fee is now we're at $475 a month. And so if you think about that, of someone paying that on a monthly basis, depending on their income streams, we try to get in roughly around that 1 to 3% of gross income, because the fee makes sense at that point. It also makes sense too, because they're usually a little bit more complicated. They got different equity packages. They got just different incomes. They want to build different assets. They just have a little bit more complexity that we can really kind of dive into and help out with. And so with some of the retention, it's just been more so where it just wasn't the right fit. Right. For example, we had one client we just brought on that we really actually told them, hey, we want to do this analysis for you. We think you should do it, but we're going to probably do the analysis, and then we're going to probably have you stop the subscription. Because it just didn't make sense specifically for them, just knowing, because we go pretty in depth with their situation where we're like, this fee just doesn't make sense, and so you probably should stop. So there have been a few situations who we've lost that's been kind of the case. So now it's up to us really to find that, making sure that we're finding the demographic that really fits our fee, moving forward. But outside of that, though, it's been actually quite good. We're pretty much on call at all times, and any questions, and help people out with just different things.
That's interesting. So we talked earlier about how you price out the subscription base. So if they don't have assets with you, but you bill them, and you bill them monthly.
Correct.
Okay. So then what's a good guideline for that? Like, is it 10% of income or some other number? Or?
Yeah. So for our clients, like I kind of mentioned, I think a guideline for them is really anywhere from 1 to 3% of gross income. So if our fee equates to 1 to 3% of their gross income on an annual basis, that's where we feel like the kind of the sweet spot really lies. If you're breaching the 3% is where all of a sudden it probably doesn't make a lot of sense.
Okay.
I had mentioned earlier too that Michael Kitces has done some research on that specifically, and they have found that anything above like 3% is typically where people will kind of start questioning that, again, price to value. And we've found that that's actually pretty accurate. So we try to get it to anywhere from 1 to 3% of their gross income as a household or as an individual, depending on if they have a significant other or not.
Interesting. Well, that's really great. Now you're building your team, right? So it was just
Yep.
you and your two partners, the LB and W. You're being the B.
I'm the B. Yep.
And then you build on other members of your team. How has that come together?
That's been fun at it as well. So we start, technically speaking, Ying, who is our creative director and our office manager, she started with us from day one. Her and I started actually or the first, technically speaking. And so she's been with us, and we just brought her on as a partner starting in January. So she's now as an official partner with Dan, Nathaniel, and myself, which has been great. She's been awesome ever since we started. And then we did start with one team member. His name was Naren, and he ended up just wanting to go a different direction about a year ago. He was like, this just isn't the space for me. I'd like to kind of go in. So it was great transition. He's doing great now too. We're still in contact. And then during that transition phase, we had an intern that we brought on full time, but he was a ROTC. So he ended up enlisting in the military, and he went to the Army in August. And so in that transition, we ended up hiring Gary Grosskopf, who started with us in August. And then we saw some significant growth in just that last year, where we've also brought on Kennedy Briggs, who started with us in March. And then we also have an intern, Caroline Kale, and she will be starting with us full-time into the summer. And she has one more semester. And if things go well, we may bring her on full-time starting in December of next year. So we definitely increased the team quite a bit in the last few months, which has been awesome. But it's been a big help on my end. They're all technically financial planning analysts. So they sit underneath me, helping us do our planning process and a lot of the analysis on the back end that we perform for the clients.
Interesting. And so now in the discussion about financial planning, since you're really a financial planning shop and you'll do some AUM, but it's really about planning.
Yeah.
And so there used to be a system called Quicken that a lot of folks in the kind of the 45 to 60-year-old crowd used, right? Now that seems to have gone away, and there's a new system. How do you make sense of all of that stuff? Like, what do people use, and how do you guys interface with them?
Yeah. Brian, you're opening up a big can of worms for me, because this is like a passion topic that I have. So Quicken, you are correct. Quicken is definitely something that helped for personal financial kind of organization, I would say. So you have mint.com, similar kind of personal capital. Wealthfront do iterations or things similar to that. But Mint is probably the most familiar, or Quicken, or now Simplify, which they have switched their new product to. They kind of they reframed their entire user interface and are doing just different things. And there's other competitors that have kind of popped their heads out. But for us, the big struggle is more so these are all direct to consumer products. So advisors don't have access to that. And which is a bit
the data. Okay.
Yeah. So we can't really see it. They wouldn't allow us to. So there are products obviously currently. So for example, eMoney has its own data aggregation tool that, if people are using eMoney, are very familiar with. Money Guide Pro ended up finally doing an aggregation tool with MX, is one of their partners as well. They just actually got that together, I think not even 9 months ago. Okay. And then Navaplan, funny enough, actually also did MX as a more aggregation type tool that they brought on just right before InvestCloud bought them, which was interesting. And so if you kind of look at it, advisors, that's kind of what we have access to be able to really do data aggregation. People are probably familiar with Bial Accounts, which is now owned by Morningstar, or Cuvo, but that was mostly for investment management, not necessarily for transaction or planning. And I personally just have a big frustration with it, because I think advisors should have access to this level of data to be able to do true kind of planning centric work. Because to me, fundamentally, if we're working from first principles, financial planning is very easy. It's what's coming in, what's going out, and what's left over. But what's really hard is what's coming in and what's going out is actually very nuanced, and it's actually hard to gather and organize and clean. And we don't have even the ability to really have access to it. So we kind of built our planning process around this idea of like a personal general ledger, bringing in transactions on a consistent basis. We get that data from eMoney. We also get that data from CSV files if we don't have access to eMoney, because not every bank connects. And then we dump all that information into our own spreadsheets. We reorganize it, and then we build out our own sheet to be able to kind of manage people's personal financial lives in a way that allows us to do projections, modeling, to actually answer questions that people really want answers to, which is, should I add to a 529? Well, can you not? We have the ability to actually be very accurate and consistent with that, to build out plans that are based off of their actual data, and not just them telling us, well, Tim, I spend 250 grand a year and I make 500. And then I laugh and I say, okay, well, we'll see. And it's never the case ever. And the way that, to tell you the story, the way I even got about this is I was using Money Guide Pro at the time, and people would tell me what they make and don't make. And I put together this nice plan, and then I would present it and they go, we can't do that. And I was like, what do you mean? You told me X, here's Y, here's what should be left over. And they're like, no, that doesn't make sense. So I just started to say, well, I'm going to fact check you. Give me your data. I want to see it so I can fact check it. And so I started fact checking it, and they were way off, because people only think of my mortgage, my utilities, stuff like that, but they forget all the other type of expenses. So
all the travel and all the expenses.
Yep. So that's where we really are kind of trying to focus on bringing that data in to be able to kind of provide a really good, it's really scenario planning to a pretty intimate level. And it is intimate too. We always tell our clients this is an intimate exercise. Like, I know when you travel, and I know when you don't, and I know what's going on. But I also always like to tell them that the data tells a story, and that story helps us plan, because it does show quite a bit. And so that's just what we kind of do on the back end to be able to help people understand and be really awareness. It creates a lot of awareness around their financial situations.
So this is pretty deep. You're going pretty deep. I mean, you're getting into people's details in a way that very few advisors do.
Correct. Yeah, I do. Yeah, it's intense. It's definitely intense. And that's why we're trying to we're developing like our own software, because it's a lot of labor, and a lot of it should be automated. It's not it's not a human resource problem. It really is a tech problem. And so we're trying to solve that currently, which has been a whole different ball wax.
Tell us about your new software. What are you going to do with that that's different from the systems that are out there like Money Guide Pro or Naviplan?
Yeah. So the goal with this software specifically, it's called Haifa Way, and we soft launched it in November. We went to the XYPN Planning Network, and we applied to present our tech, and we were accepted. We were one of 9 out of 30 applicants, I believe. And the overall idea is to get to the more in-depth layer of data from a client household. And so if you look at eMoney or Money Guide Pro or any other software, Right Capital, sure, they do add data aggregation, but that data doesn't do anything. It doesn't connect. Like eMoney, for example, doesn't even store data for very long. And if it breaks, it goes away, because eMoney wasn't built to do that. It was just built to have this 360 view of a client for most advisors to say like, hey, I know you have a Fidelity account you should bring over. That was the thought process of when it was built, and there hasn't been a lot of iterations to it. And don't get me wrong, eMoney has some interesting planning tools, and we do use it on the back end depending on the scenario. But our goal at Haifa Way is to actually bring in that data to actually start doing real-time modeling. The best way I like to explain it is if you think of FP&A software, so financial planning and analysis software for companies, it's the same theory, right? Those companies are bringing in general ledger, they're bringing in data, and they're doing projections for cost of goods sold, for revenues, for all of that stuff to understand the health of the business. That's how you generate all of your transactions or all of your insights. And we want to do the same thing on the household level, because what's hard is that I could advise a client to, let's say, buy a new house. And what's going to happen is people are like, well, look at all these ratios. Well, once I buy that house, those ratios all change, right? Because their cash flows change. Right. So when you change those underlying assumptions, that changes everything else. And so we've essentially built out a system that allows us to be able to see that change before it happens. So people can be aware if it makes sense, which allows them to start making very informed decisions when it comes to their finances. And then there's a lot of other things that we want to do for tracking that data, be able to do better projections over time. Expenses are extremely nuanced. So for example, doing this, I've noticed that over time, I can say pretty confidently that when people are stressed, depending if they have stress at home, stress at work, expenses go up because they don't want to think about it. And I can watch the data change, and I can see they'll then tell me about their experiences at home, and those change as well. And so it's just different data that advisors will have more insight to know the client to a really, really high degree to be able to do better plans.
So you're going, it's really interesting. You're going really deep. Have you had any pushback on people not wanting to give you data like that?
So we haven't actually. Okay. We kind of require it because we feel like it's necessary for us to be accurate. And so if they usually say no, I don't want it to do it, then that's just probably not the right fit for us. But we actually haven't anybody balk about it. And I would say too, once they actually see us go through our process, they're actually more willing to give up more data because it is providing them with value. And so we haven't really had any issues with that, but it is a question I get all the time, but everyone's like, okay, yeah, I get this. And if you think the funny thing too, is there is a research report that was done that technically speaking, people are more willing to give up their data to a financial advisor or their wealth manager than a doctor. Came out of, I think, like Boston Consulting did a research on that.
Right.
And so our industry is actually more willing, people are more willing to give it up because it means a lot. If that right. awareness and that ability to understand is extremely important for them. So they're pretty willing to show the data. And we take it very serious as well. And I always tell people, especially our team members, that this is intimate. We don't judge. And we always tell them, we don't care where you spend your money. We just need to know in order to understand, to answer some of your questions. And so we try to take that very serious.
This is really your thing. We're just here to help you, right? We're just here.
Exactly. And that's how our fee represents. Yeah. And that's how our fee is set up too, is it's like, hey, I'm not incentivized to sell you anything. I'm just incentivized to try to make you as best as possible, and get you into the right pieces. And so that's kind of how we set ourselves up.
Nice. Well, this you're really a practitioner. And now I would point out too for our listeners that Naviplan is a Wisconsin product as well.
Milwaukee,
right? Yeah.
So, and InvestCloud too. I was surprised they came bottom up, but it makes sense for them.
The financial planning world revolves now around Wisconsin. How about that?
I hope so. Yeah, that is the goal. That is the goal.
Yes. So, well, great. So what do you see as the future of the industry now? And you're creating your own software. Is that what folks are going to have to do, or the industry will wake up and create some new things?
Brian, honestly, it's funny that so the future of the industry, in my opinion, I think it's going to change. I think everybody is starting to wake up to this idea of financial planning. I think that people are waking up to it because AUM it's funny. There has been research done now where the fee compression is not as heavy as once people are anticipating, where it's been holding at about 1%, and it's actually gone up a little bit, given some research reports I've read.
Right.
But on the AUM side, what's hard is you're getting compression, I think, in the sense of indexation and direct to consumer products, where people come to us and it's like, well, hey, I can do this on my own. And it's being promoted like that. So it's very difficult to combat that because there is a lot more accessibility to direct to consumer. And so now everyone's waking up to this idea like, well, how do we create this retention with our clients or create a sticky relationship? And they're like, oh, this planning thing is an interesting idea. We should do that. And you're not even just seeing it within our space, so registered investment advisors, but you're seeing it at JP Morgan, you're seeing it at Wells Fargo, you're seeing it at Goldman Sachs. They're trying to create this idea of kind of a robo type hybrid advice. We're like, hey, look at our cool tech platform that provides you all this insight. Right. We can help you out in this realm. So it's kind of spanning across multiple industries in different ways. And so our industry, I think, is going to continue to be more planning centric. And you're seeing a lot of that is to grow, where you're seeing a lot of firms like ourselves switching our business model up a little bit, especially more solo advisors that are coming in. I see it all the time where they're, subscription based or fee only or, hourly based, because there's this idea that planning is something that's very real and valuable. And that's what clients want, especially the younger generation. And when I say younger, probably anywhere from 30 to 45. And so I think you're only going to see that persist over time. So if you aren't starting to truly plan and you're only doing investment management, I think that you might be a little bit in trouble, and you got to really rethink your business model and how you're going to incorporate that over time. But kind of going back to what you were talking about earlier, and part of this podcast is that we're very isolated. Advisors are very isolated. Like, I'm only one person, and I don't get to talk to a lot of advisors about what they're doing because there's this idea of competition, which I don't really believe in. That's why I do this podcast. Like, I will explain to anybody what we do and how we do it, because we have natural networks that we may never even cross paths ever. And you could be a firm down the road from me. I mean, a lot of our clients, the majority of our clients come out of California. So we don't even really do much, like, we're doing less business in Wisconsin. So if you think about it like that, what makes me nervous, and I would raise my hand and saying, hey, everybody, we should actually gather together, because what I'm nervous about is more of these direct to consumer plays and trying to actually remove us from the equation, which I think is going to be very difficult because you still have to interpret data. But what makes me nervous is that all these other firms are starting to recognize that this data that they have is extremely important. I think they're utilizing it in the wrong way, but advisors don't have access to that data, which is a problem. So if I go to a newer client, let's say they're younger, they're going to hold up personal capital, or they're going to hold up wealth fund. They're like, do you do this? And I'm going to say, I have eMoney that doesn't have an app, and it's kind of okay, and it looks whatever, but no, I don't. So I can't even compete from a tech stack perspective as the direct to consumers. And so that makes me nervous for our industry. So when I look at the tech stack within our industry, I think that we definitely need to take a step forward and get away from, is it goal-based? Is it cash flow-based accounting? And you're talking about the calculation engine. And I want to say, I want to go database. I want the data to actually start doing true insights, to start competing with all of these other shops, because that's where we're going to get out competed, not against each other. It's going to be from outside industry pressures. And so that's kind of where I think the future is going. And so unless we start really providing better tech stack to the RIA space, when it comes to that, we'll get left behind. And I think we're already behind personally, but we'll see what happens. So that's kind of where I see the future: planning centric, more data centric.
So Tim, now we see, financial firms like yours and another one that we met the other day, working with people in their 30s, but the Merrills and the Morgans and the big firms, unless there's a certain amount of fee, they don't even want to deal with them. They give the advisors a 10% payout, and they diminish it. They create disincentives to do it. So that looks like a pretty big market of people who are in their 30s, who are Henrys, as you say, high earners, not rich yet. So you work with a Henry market.
Correct. Yeah, that's primarily who we work with. I mean, we'll work with anybody. Our client base ranges in ages anywhere from 85 down to, I think our youngest is 20. But our sweet spot is probably those, again, Henrys. And it's really more of, and it kind of, that's our niche, I guess. I think this idea too, I understand that advisors are niching out, but I also think that advisors have to niche out because they have a lack of technology stack as well. I think that you can start applying it to people in a customized way. And I think that these 30-year-olds and stuff, they want customized planning. So I always like to tell our clients, I may advise you on something that looks very different than someone that I just talked to yesterday that has the exact same maybe net worth and income and assets to you, because I understand your situation to a very high degree, and I know how we need to move forward on this. So the idea of true customized planning, and not just hey, let's just ramp this up and roll it out as fast as we can. And then to be able to scale that is going to be really the winner. And I think that it's not even that the advisor will need to do that. It's that the end client is going to expect that, because they're getting that from every other aspect of their life.
Right.
Everything is becoming more customized, more directly to them. I mean, at this point, even ads are customized because they're listening to your phone, right? I mean, that generation is just expects customization. It's not a nice to have anymore.
Right.
So
it is interesting because you can get very different outcomes between an Ameriprise or a Merrill Lynch, as well as but none of it's customized really to the investor individually. It's more kind of product based, what the firm can put out there. So now you guys are taking it from a completely different approach, mano a mano, one-on-one, and then you customize an approach, and then all the other services of the industry are kind of dealt with in the customization. But the key is the customization for the individual. Very personal, very detailed, very organized, really interesting business.
Yeah, that's what we've kind of built, and now it's the ability, like, the kind of come full circle is that we've built this up. It's hard to scale, but there is a way if we can create a tech stack that allows us to have that scalability, and then give that else. And I also think that if we have the ability to create the tech stack the way that we want to create it, that it also will normalize what planning actually is.
Yes.
Right. So this idea of holistic financial planning, I think, is used as a marketing tool. But I always like to tell people, like, I want to know how the sausage is made, and you probably don't want to know, because I've been there, I've seen it. And that's where we can normalize some of that, where the expectation of what people are receiving is different, because now advisors have a normalization of what they have access to in a scalable way. Yeah.
Fascinating. Well, I think this is now the second interview we've done very similar to this, where it's someone who's a younger professional learning about how to work with younger folks that the big financial firms have just ignored for a long time.
Yeah, it is. It's a huge base that, is out there, and but the hard part is you have to, some firms aren't built for it, because you have to probably switch up how you do your fee modeling. And we just happen to be at the time where it just made sense for us. And it's been, probably one of the better moves that we've made in the last 6.5 years to make that shift and adjustment. So, well,
we look forward to seeing how things develop, and really appreciate your being with us today on the 4-Star podcast and the Financial Advisors Workshop. So thank you very much for being with us, and we'll leave it there for today.
Perfect, Brian. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And we'll check in with you later on. Again, thanks everyone for being with us on the Financial Advisors Workshop, a 4-Star podcast. Thank you very much. Have a great day.